sit there amidst the shards of your broken trust and ask yourself, why do they do it? Why do those we let in the deepest, those we give our naked, trembling hearts to turn around and hurt us as though we were strangers? Why is it that those who once looked into our eyes with affection can suddenly walk away with indifference, as if the soul you shared meant nothing? I have seen this suffering in countless faces, patients, friends, seekers, even in myself. There is a hidden truth buried under the weight of betrayal. It is not the kind of truth they will admit. Perhaps it is not even one they can face, but it is there, lurking in the unconscious, like a silent predator. And to uncover it, we must go down into the shadows. The pain you feel is not just emotional, it is archetypal. You are not simply mourning the loss of affection, you are confronting the collapse of a myth. That myth is the belief that love guarantees safety. It does not. The unconscious, in its paradoxical nature, knows this well. The conscious mind resists it. The ego recoils, but the soul recognizes this ancient wound. The betrayal of the beloved has been encoded into our psychic blueprint since the dawn of human intimacy. Think of the myths, Cain and Abel, Judas and Jesus, Brutus and Caesar. The story of being wounded by someone you love is not new. It is primordial, and the pain you feel now resonates with something ancient within you. When someone hurts you, as if you meant nothing, they are not simply erasing your value, they are projecting their shadow. Projection is one of the most treacherous operations of the psyche. It is the displacement of one's inner darkness onto another. What they cannot face in themselves, they cast onto you. They accuse you of being needy because they are afraid of their own vulnerability. They call you too emotional because they are terrified of their own unlived grief. They say you are too much because their inner world is barren. But these are not confessions, they are exorcisms. They are unconsciously trying to purge themselves of the very parts of the psyche they have disowned. You became the mirror, and they could not bear what they saw. And so they shattered it. This is not an excuse. It is not absolution. It is illumination. To understand does not mean to condone, but if you wish to stop carrying the pain like a permanent brand on your soul, you must see that this hurt, this callous dismissal, was not about your worth. It was about their unconscious, their refusal to descend into their own underworld, their fear of what they might find if they faced their true selves. So they fled, or attacked, or vanished into the fog of avoidance. The truth they will never admit, because it would require an act of psychological death and rebirth, is that your depth frightened them. Your presence called forth their absence. Your intimacy awakened their repression. You did not make them feel insignificant. You made them feel exposed. And rather than meet you in that sacred place of mutual nakedness, they chose to protect the fragile castle of their ego. And now you are here, standing among ruins. But let me tell you something. With all the gravity of one who has wandered the inner world for decades, this ruin is sacred. The heartbreak is the alchemical vessel. The ego, in its arrogance, believes it is being annihilated. But the soul knows it is being initiated. You have been chosen by the unconscious to carry this wound. not as a curse, but as a crucible. The wound is the entry point into the depths, into the mystery, into the self. There is a dream I once interpreted. A woman dreamt she was in a cathedral that was collapsing. She wept, believing all was lost. But beneath the fallen stones, she found a staircase. She descended, trembling, and discovered a secret chamber lit by a dim golden flame. In it were ancient scrolls, bonnets, and relics, symbols of the eternal. This, my dear listener, is what heartbreak truly is. The collapse of the outer temple so that the inner one may be found. They hurt you like you meant nothing. But this betrayal cracked open a secret stairwell within you. The ego sees it as humiliation. The soul sees it as initiation. You will be tempted to cover the wound, to rush into distractions, to armor your heart with cynicism. Resist this. Let the wound speak. Let it bleed its story. Because there is something inside the pain that is older than language, and it is trying to awaken you. You see, the one who hurts you often vanishes, but their shadow remains haunting your perception, coloring your future relationships, whispering lies, you were never enough. But this voice is not truly theirs. It is the internalized shadow, now fused with your own inner critic, a psychic parasite, and it must be exorcised, not through rage, not through revenge, but through reclamation. You must go inward and retrieve the pieces of yourself you gave away. Each time you compromised your truth to be accepted, a fragment of soul was left behind. Each time you silenced your intuition to keep the peace. A piece of yourself was buried. Each time you chased validation to feel worthy, a sliver of your divine essence slipped into exile. These pieces are not lost. They wait for you. In dreams, in tears, in the silence after everyone has gone. And when you are ready, when the pain has humbled you and stripped away illusion, you will gather them one by one with trembling hands. And as you do, you will feel something ancient stirring. The reassembly of the self, individuation, the great work of becoming whole, does not begin with bliss. It begins with a wound. It is through the crack that the light enters. Yes, but it is also through the wound that the self calls us to awaken. And so, though you may hate them for hurting you, though your heart may scream for justice or closure, the deeper path is to turn inward and ask, what within me was ready to be revealed by this shattering? This is not spiritual bypass. This is not saying you deserve the harm. No, harm is harm. It must be named. It must be grieved. But what I offer you is a deeper key. The soul will sometimes use even betrayal as a doorway to the unconscious. Do not remain trapped in the role of the victim. That is a necessary stage, but not the destination. There is power in the pain, but only if you listen to what it is truly asking of you. Who are you? Without their gaze, who are you when no one is validating your worth? Who are you when the masks fall away? That is the question the wound demands. You answer not for them, for you. And as you descend into your own unconscious, you will meet figures, archetypes, symbols, memories. Some will terrify you, These are your shadow aspects, the parts you disowned in order to be loved, the rage you swallowed, the power you abandoned, the wildness you denied. You will feel as though you are losing yourself, but in truth, you are retrieving yourself. The journey through betrayal is not linear. It is a spiral. You will revisit the same grief in new layers. You will find old rage rising like a wave just when you thought you were healed. This is not failure. This is the spiral of becoming, and in time slow, sacred time, you will emerge, not as who you were, but as who you truly are. Let them never admit the truth. That is their task, their karma, their initiation, should they ever choose to face it. But yours is now clearer. They hurt you like you meant nothing, but the wound has revealed that you are everything, not because they said so, but because you remembered. Let the forgetting end here. I have often said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And what is more fateful than the recurring echo of being dismissed, unseen, unwanted? The tragedy is not only that they hurt you, it is that you now stand in danger of believing them. Believing the lie that you are discardable, that you were too much, too sensitive, too intense. But those accusations are distortions projected by the wounded onto the luminous. And if you accept them, you risk becoming a stranger to your own soul. Let us take a moment to speak of the dream world, for it is there that the unconscious whispers when the waking mind is too defended. There was a man who came to me once, tormented by betrayal. He dreamt he was locked in a house that was sinking into a swamp. He tried to scream, but no one heard him. Every time he reached for help, the walls closed in tighter. I asked him, "What do you believe the house is?" He replied, "It is my worth. It is everything I've built to prove I matter." And I told him what he did not want to hear. Then let it sink. Let it all fall. Because only in the drowning of the falls can the true emerge. We build identities on what others reflect to us. But when those mirrors shatter, we are forced to face the terrifying task of looking inward. And that is the beginning of freedom. Pain is a harsh liberator, but a liberator nonetheless. The betrayal was not just an event, it was a symbolic death. And now you are standing at the threshold of rebirth. There is a figure in mythology who represents what you are experiencing. Persephone, dragged into the underworld against her will, her innocence shattered, her light extinguished. And yet it is in the depths that she becomes queen of the underworld. Not by choice, but by necessity. You too have been dragged into an emotional Hades. But what you do now determines whether you emerge as victim or a sovereign. The alchemists knew this process well. They called it the nigredo, the blackening, the phase where everything decomposes, where all structure collapses. The ego panics in this phase. It clings to the past. It begs for reversal. But the soul, quiet and patient, knows this is the necessary disintegration. Before transmutation, you must be willing to sit in the ashes. You must be willing to feel what you tried not to feel. The loneliness, the humiliation, the hunger for closure that may never come. And when you stop resisting, something astonishing begins, the emergence of the inner witness. The inner witness does not judge. It observes, it does not retaliate, it reflects, it does not blame, it integrates, and as the witness awakens, the stories you told yourself begin to unravel. You no longer need to prove they were wrong about you. You no longer need to chase an apology. You no longer need to avenge your pain, because you begin to understand the wound was real, but your essence was never touched by it. What they failed to see in you was not absence, it was your hidden power. And now, in the privacy of your own becoming, that power begins to rise. Let us return to the concept of the shadow. Those who hurt you without remorse have not integrated their own shadow. They are fragmented, afraid of their inner chaos. So when you bring presence, depth, authenticity, they are confronted with their own superficiality. And instead of facing it, they flee or attack. But you, if you are to break the cycle, must not become them. You must meet your own shadow. This is the most courageous act of all, to admit your own bitterness, to confess your rage, to acknowledge the part of you that wants them to suffer, and rather than act from it, you offer it the one thing it has never known, your attention. The shadow is not evil. It is wounded genius, a repressed life, disavowed energy. When you own it, it becomes creative fire. But when you deny it, it becomes destruction either of others or of yourself. You were hurt, yes, but the real task is not to fix them. It is to face yourself, to ask, why did I stay when they gave so little? Why did I silence myself to keep their approval? Why did I equate love with abandonment? These are dangerous questions. They threaten to shatter the foundation of your old identity. But they are sacred, because they lead you out of the house that was sinking. I want you to imagine yourself as a vessel. When you were born, this vessel was whole. But over the years, each betrayal, each dismissal, each violation cracked it. And now you feel you are leaking life, that nothing holds, that you are broken beyond repair. But the Japanese have a practice called kintsugi, the art of mending broken pottery with gold. They do not hide the cracks, they illuminate them, they see the breakage as part of the beauty. What if your wound is not a defect but a path to grace? This is not sentimentality, it is transformation. The path of individuation requires that you carry your pain like a torch, not a chain. Do not seek to erase the past, transcend it. Do not wait for them to say they were wrong. Outgrow the need. The truth they will never admit is that they saw something in you that terrified them. Not because you were weak, but because you were deep. And deep people disturb shallow waters. They hurt you, yes, but you were not destroyed. You are being reforged. Every great soul I have ever encountered was first shattered, not once, but many times. The shattering is not the end. It is the beginning of awakening. It is the moment the false self dies and the eternal self begins to rise. So grieve, mourn, let the old illusions fall, and then begin to gather the gold. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are becoming not in the way the world defines progress, not through accumulation or validation, but through the sacred unraveling that strips away all illusions until only the soul remains. The soul is not concerned with the admiration of others. It does not care whether they recognize your worth. It only seeks integration, wholeness. And the wound, paradoxically, is its doorway. The ancient mystics knew this. The shamans were called by illness, by madness, by dreams too terrifying to bear. They were not chosen because they were strong, but because they were broken open. And through that rupture, a new wisdom poured in. You too have been broken open, not by accident, not by cosmic cruelty, but by a hidden necessity. And so you ask, what now? Now you descend into the symbolic underworld, into the belly of the whale, into the cave where the dragons sleep. The descent is not a punishment. It is a rite of passage. You cannot become yourself without it. The self is not the ego expanded. It is the ego dissolved and reformed in the fires of truth. I once dreamed of a house with infinite basements. Each level took me deeper into older layers of the psyche. First childhood memories, then ancestral fears, then mythic symbols older than language. There, at the lowest level, was a pool of still water. I knew intuitively that if I gazed into it long enough, I would see not only my face, but the face of the divine. The unconscious is like that. At first, it confronts us with what we've repressed. The grief, the anger, the shame. But if we are courageous enough to remain, it reveals something more. The archetypes, the eternal patterns, the divine blueprints embedded within the human soul. You are not merely a victim of this pain. You are being summoned by it, called to embody an archetype greater than the wound. The archetype of the wounded healer comes to mind. Chiron, the centaur, wounded by a poisoned arrow, unable to heal himself, yet becoming the greatest healer in myth. Your wound, like his, may not disappear, but it may awaken your deepest medicine. The ones who hurt you may never acknowledge what they've done, but their actions have unknowingly initiated your transformation. What they will never admit is that they saw your light, and instead of honoring it, they feared it. Because to stand beside someone luminous is to risk seeing the shadows we've ignored. And so they diminished you, not because you were small, but because you reminded them of how small they had allowed themselves to become. You did not provoke this wound, but you must respond to it, not by shrinking, not by growing armor, but by growing roots. The ego asks, how do I protect myself from ever being hurt again? But the soul asks, how do I grow strong enough to keep loving even after the hurt? Strength is not coldness. It is warmth that has survived the fire. There is a danger here, a subtle temptation to become the very thing you despised, to let the pain twist your perception, to wear betrayal as a lens and see all others through it. But if you do, then they have won, not in a moral sense, but in a psychic one. You have allowed their unconsciousness to infect yours. That is why we must return again and again to the inner work, the dreams, the reflections, the solitude, not to escape life, but to see it clearly. There was once a patient who told me, "I will never love again." I asked, "Then what will you become?" She paused. "Safe," she said, but I saw in her eyes the flicker of death, not physical, but psychological. She had entombed her soul in a prison of fear. The wound had not made her wise. It had made her afraid. That is not healing. That is stagnation. Real healing is risky. It requires you to open the door again to yourself. First, then to others. But this time, you do so not from naivety, but from clarity. You see the patterns. You recognize the red flags. You do not chase love that abandons. You do not negotiate with those who cannot sit in silence. You no longer perform to be seen. You anchor, and in that anchoring, you draw to you souls who have also walked through fire. That is the beauty of the path. You lose much, but what you find is real. You stop attracting those who feed on your light and begin to walk with those who honor it. And more importantly, you begin to honor it yourself. The betrayal you suffered was a severing, yes, but also a sorting, the end of illusion, the collapse of fantasy, the death of who you thought you had to be. They hurt you like you meant nothing. But the deeper truth, the one they may never admit, is that you meant too much. You meant more than they were prepared to handle. And now you must become someone who no longer needs to be handled. You must become sovereign. The sovereign is not above pain, but they are not ruled by it. They sit with it, listen to it, integrate it, and then create from it art, words, prayer, stillness. Whatever your medium, let it rise from the wound, not as performance, but as transmutation. Let your pain be the ink. Let your scar be the paint. Let your silence be the canvas. And from it, build a life that no longer seeks to be understood by those who could not even see you. There is peace in letting go, not of hope, but of illusion. Let go of the story that they will one day awaken. Let go of the need to make them see. Let go of the fantasy that they were ever capable of the love you imagined. This is not bitterness. This is maturity. And from this ground, you will rise not above them, but beyond the need for them. That is where freedom lives. That is where the self waits. Freedom is not forgetting. It is remembering without attachment. It is the ability to recall what happened not with a trembling heart or clenched jaw, but with the quiet gaze of one who has returned from the underworld bearing sacred knowledge. You do not erase the pain, you transmute it. You no longer need to rehearse your story to prove your worth. The wound has spoken, it has taught, it has crowned you with insight, and now it releases you. There is a moment, if you walk this path with sincerity, where grief turns into gratitude, not for the betrayal, not for the heartbreak, but for what it revealed, for what it demanded, for the door it opened within you that no soft hand ever could. That door is the portal to your wholeness. And though it may have been opened by cruelty, what you do with it now is yours to claim. Many fear this level of inner work. It is easier to blame, easier to build walls than to break patterns, easier to dismiss others than to examine our projections. But that is not the path of the self. That is the path of the ego, wounded, guarded, asleep. The self requires awakening, and awakening always begins in the ruins. You ask, perhaps, what if they never feel sorry? And I say, what if they do? But only when you're no longer waiting. What if they awaken, but too late to reach you? Would you still hinge your freedom on that? Or would you have already outgrown the apology? The mature soul does not wait to be freed by others. It picks the lock from within. You were never trapped by them. You were trapped by your longing for them to be different. But once that longing dissolves, not in bitterness, but in truth, then the chains fall silently to the floor. That is what they will never admit, that your departure, your healing, your silence speaks louder than any vengeance ever could. And if you do this work, if you truly integrate, you will no longer need to speak in the language of the wound. You will speak in the language of wisdom. In that place, there is no need to correct the narrative, no need to make them see, no need to reclaim what was never truly lost. Because what matters most was never given away, only forgotten and now remembered. Do not be surprised if, in your silence, they return, not because they love you, but because the silence has made them curious. The power of a soul that no longer seeks is magnetic. But you will know the difference now between genuine reconciliation and the hunger of the unhealed. You will feel it in your body, in your dreams, in the quiet knowing that comes not from thought, but from presence. The psyche remembers. Even when the mind forgets, the body knows. And if you listen closely, you will feel a new compass arising, not external validation, but inner alignment. This is the gift of the wound. Clarity. You may still feel waves of sorrow. That is natural. Integration is not a straight line. But you will no longer be ruled by the storm. You will be the observer of it. And eventually, the one who can calm it with a word. There's a phrase the alchemists used, solve coagula, to dissolve and to rebind. This is the essence of transformation. You have been dissolved. Now you begin the sacred work of binding your soul back together, not in its former shape, but in its destined one. They hurt you like you meant nothing. But now, you see, what they could not grasp was never your value, it was your depth. And not everyone is willing to dive. Let that be your liberation, not your shame. Some souls are drawn to the surface because the depths remind them of their unchosen work. You did not fail by being too much. You were simply misread by those not yet fluent in the language of the soul. You speak now with a voice shaped by silence, touched by sorrow, strengthened by solitude. Let that voice guide you. Let it be the song that sings others through their darkness. For the wound that bleeds, when raw, becomes a wound that teaches when healed. And that is your task now, not to seek retribution, but to offer resonance. You have walked through fire, and because of that, you can now carry flame, not to burn, but to illuminate. You will meet others who are still caught in the forgetting, still seeking to make sense of the senseless, still building altars to those who wounded them. Speak gently to them, not with advice, but with presence, with the wisdom of one who has stood in their place and returned with soul intact. That is how the collective heals, not through argument, but through the quiet authority of those who have done the inner work. and you have done it, or at the very least, you have begun. And that beginning in a world so bent on avoidance is nothing short of heroic. So bless the wound, not for what it cost you, but for what it revealed in you. They hurt you like you meant nothing. But here is the final truth. They will never admit you were never nothing. You were a portal, a mirror, a spark, a soul brave enough to descend and wise enough to rise. Now go, not with armor, but with wings